Nigel Farage has been apoplectic about the support that he is getting from mainstream media and the interference that he's getting from Ofcom and also Google. He was complaining last night about Google blacklisting his Reform UK site, and then within a few minutes it got back. And he was very grateful to someone called Matt, I think. And I mean, the point about Nigel Farage, and no matter what you think of Farage, you have to concede, when Farage gets irritated by the systems that irritate all of us, Farage has an effect, because Farage has a voice that reaches. You remember with the debanking scandal, Farage made a noise, people were forced to resign, people were forced to backtrack, and although he's not got his old celebrated, loved Coots account, I'm sure he's sitting quite pretty in the banking issues. But, he called out something that was fast becoming a problem. As he called out Google and the power of Google and the power of the monolithic social media systems to silence people if they're not saying what social media or what the AI running social media, what the algorithms seem to think they should be saying. And it's not the job of the social media platforms to police and censor the content. It's the job of the social media platforms to provide the platform. That should be it. This censorship thing needs to be seriously investigated. And I think from this point of view, Farage is absolutely right. And he's put out a video about his concerns with Ofcom, and his concerns particularly with what he thinks are the ways that mainstream media has been attacking him rather than showcasing him. Well, actually, it's not entirely true. Listen to what he's got to say.
If you watch the BBC, listen to it, or any of the other broadcasters, and I include in this ITV, GB News, Channel 4, some days you literally wouldn't know that Reform were lying second geographically in most of the country. Why is this? Well, I'll tell you. The regulator of broadcasters in Britain is Ofcom. Ofcom Aquango, stuffed full of establishment types. And the rules they've given broadcasters are very simple. They say whilst they should take into account the current level of opinion polls, the main determinant of how much coverage each party gets is their performance in the last 2 elections. Well, Reform UK is brand new. We've never contested a national election before. And because of that, the coverage we're allocated is 8%. We are getting the same level of coverage as the Green Party, despite the fact we're polling more than 3 times their number. All of these rules are designed to keep British politics and British broadcasting as a nice, cosy club. Everybody's happy, everybody's doing well, and no new challenges are allowed. Well, this is now, given where we are, and I've waited to say this, but given where we are, this is now an outrage. This now amounts to election interference. This is denying the public to hear arguments that are gaining great resonance out there on the ground.
But now, let me just add a little rhetorical flourish and say, just think about the amount of airtime he has been given, somebody who has never been elected to the British Parliament, somebody who has only recently appointed himself the leader of his party. He has received enormous coverage on mainstream media. This, of course, has meant that in the youth vote, he's got a serious bounce. The Conservatives have got a serious drop. I think they're at 6% or something ridiculous. But late last night, there was a call which went out across the Conservative system urging candidates who were looking to defend a majority of between 2,000 and 4,000 to give up, and to send their managers and themselves to support the bigwigs, the big cabinet ministers who have majorities of 20,000 up to 40,000, because they are in danger. People like Suella Braverman, people like Rees-Mogg, people like Liz Truss are in danger of losing their seat on July the 4th. And the Conservative Party is running out of money. It was only able to raise 250,000 last week. And it sent out pitiful begging letters saying, look how much Labour's raising. Look how little we're raising. Come on, help. Please, I'm putting my hands out. Give me more. More? No, there's going to be no more. The Conservative Party needs to change. Now, if what happens is what is expected, which is that these big beasts are defeated in the general election, it's likely that the only people left in the Conservative Party to take control will be the people who are closer to the One Nation Tories, people like Tom Tugendhat, who could have another attempt. He may be the only cabinet minister or the only MP with cabinet experience left in the very small rump of a party. And if the polls are to be believed, and of course they're not, the likelihood is that the Lib Dems will form the next opposition, not the Conservatives. And that, of course, is ironic, given the fact that the polls are strongly suggesting more support for reform than the Lib Dems. But given the first past the post system, which frankly does it not, it has to change. Given the first past the post system, the Lib Dems are looking likely to get 60, 70 seats. Reform, it might be lucky to get 1 or 2 seats. And I think given the trip up of Nigel Farage over the EU NATO thing, I think Farage himself may struggle to get his seat, and it may be Giles, the Conservative who is in the seat at the moment, who may actually win. And Giles is a good constituency MP in Clapton, and he deserves to win. He's also more One Nation Tory, and that is the group which is more likely to get through this present election, but in such a reduced rump that they may well be eclipsed by the number of Lib Dem members elected, and rightly so. Now, there are people who suggest that with such an imbalance in Parliament, the Labour Party could find itself struggling as it comes to the midterm of its tenure, may have to call a general election, and at that point, Reform may well be in a position to strike back and to make a big scene, because it will then, by that point, have attracted the bigwigs who were ousted in the Conservative election, in this election on July the 4th, and it might well have attracted a lot of those Brexiteering voters. And it might well be buoyed up by the election results on the 4th of July anyway. I think it would be very interesting to see whether Farage actually gets in. I think whether he gets in or whether he doesn't, it doesn't diminish his power and his leadership. But I think it's not a foregone conclusion anymore because of his stumble, and indeed his fuss about Google, his fuss about Ofcom, all his fuss and noise and bluster last night was really a Farage attempt to distract from his stupidity over Putin and NATO and the EU, because he knows he's been a silly Billy, and of course he has. And I think people are more likely to remember the NATO-EU comments than they are to remember the barrage of Farage late last night about Ofcom and MSM bias and Google's nastiness. But well done, Farage, for bringing up issues which affect us all. Well done, well done. And you know, as I said during the debanking crisis, I'm very grateful to him for raising that issue because the banks are out of control. But the fact that he's raised that issue has not reformed banking. We need more work, I think. I'm using the word we because I'm thinking there's a lot of people who, like me, have struggled with the arrogance of banking in the last few years. And it's not just one bank, it's spread across the industry as far as I can see. And talking to other people with bank accounts in other banks, with business accounts in other banks, I hear the same stories that I'm telling. So I think this is not a one-off experience. And Farage is right. There's an arrogance in banking which puts the banks before the customers. It's wrong. It's wrong. The banks are there to serve, like the post office, like the police, like the army, like politicians. And when people in a serving industry, in a serving capacity, people who are serving the people, start thinking that they are in a position of power and can use that power for their own greed and influence, that's the beginnings of tyranny. And with any luck, we bring that